What's on your mind?
Let 'em know.
Express what's on your mind. What's on your mind?
Let 'em know. Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, you speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective with shines of light. Cause it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference in someone's life. Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.
And hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Perspectives. I am Daren Jaime, and of course, we thank you for joining us. As always, you can watch Perspectives every week here on Bronx's Channel 67. If you want to find out more information about the show, of course, we encourage you to go to our social media platforms. The station's platform is BronxNet TV. If you want to reach me personally on Facebook, that would be Daren C. Jaime, and then also on Instagram and Twitter at DCJaime23. And there you might be able to find some information as well as some inspiration as well. Please be joined by a very special guest who is a longtime friend of Perspectives. She's a playwright as well as an author. She's also a civil rights attorney. And currently, she's a fellow and visiting professor at Harvard Kennedy School in Cambridge. She's here to talk to us about everything about the Constitution, SCOTUS, and then more. We're pleased to be joined by Professor Gloria Browne-Marshall. And good to have you back, Gloria.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I'm glad to have you. And, we're talking... it's the first time that we've had the opportunity to gather since pretty much COVID. Give me a little bit of insight as to what you've been up to.
Well, first, trying to survive. Second, to live life more abundantly. And third, to continue my work, which is to help empower people and use law and the arts to do that.
And when we talk about empowering people, obviously you've spent a lot of time talking about the Constitution and understanding how the framers framed it and how we've, in many ways, have been framed. So give me a little bit about the work that you've been doing lately in educating and also bringing awareness.
Well, one of the things that I always like doing is teaching, and whether or not it's helping to empower people through community service, through public service, being a social justice attorney, a writer, playwright in whatever form. So I've been writing plays, and I've had two of them turned into Zoom films. One is on police-involved civilian shooting involving a Black 16-year-old who's encountered with a white police officer, ends with his death, but his resurrection in a way in which his soul will not rest until he knows why the officer committed this act. That is titled Shot, Caught a Soul, and that's available on YouTube and other places and website. But I also worked on a play titled Dreams of Emmett Till. And that is a play that takes the Emmett Till story into the 21st century. Little did I know when I worked on that play that all of these issues would come up out of the Emmett Till story of his murder as a 14-year-old in Money, Mississippi, segregated time, and Carolyn Bryant, who's been in the news. And so since then, I've also been part of a documentary that was on Emmett Till. So there's been a lot done, but I still have a full-length play that I want to see in theaters. And it really looks at the longevity of our struggle for freedom from Africa to today, but from the lens of the constant racial justice struggle. Who owns the American dream? And so that full-length play is looking for a theater. So if there are some theater lovers, theater owners, artistic producers listening to this program right now, let me know so I can send you my play, and you can see it's a 2-character play in which I believe we can make progress and save some lives. So many of these young white men who have become very angry about their circumstance, that they believe their American dream has been thwarted by others like myself and other people of color and other immigrants. And we need to explore that more. And that play does that. In the meantime, I've worked on an animated series on the Constitution. So produced by WHYY. There's been so much that I try to do during the pandemic, but I also at the whole time wanted to also keep my family close. And I lost my mom during this time period. So like everybody else, I've been through a lot and tried to come out on the other side stronger than I went in, but also wiser.
And you made the most of this pandemic. I mean, you took the time to get books out, right? And you wanted to make sure that the voice was going to be carried and that people were going to become more aware of these issues that are so germane to society. I think that many of us got a new refreshing to see America really, unfortunately, embrace the whole edition of race, right? Because of the whole George Floyd situation. We would not be talking about George Floyd had it not been home during COVID. Or Breonna Taylor or Ahmaud Arbery. These are the things that actually grip America for a change. And there was a shaking. And when we talk about the work that you're doing, that's exactly what you want to create, right? You want to create a shaking of letting people know, listen, there's more to it than what we see.
That, you're so right. And we have to also realize the martyrdom of George Floyd and the fact that there was this one moment in time in which this country came to a crossroads. And that's the title of my play, A Crossroad. And so this country too often comes to a crossroad, it tries to debate which way to go and decides that it's going to retreat back into its old ways or make those old ways refabricated in some way. And so we're still going along crippled on that same path. And we look at that from constitutionally protected rights that we thought were protected. But now we have a rogue element on the Supreme Court that is controlling the future of this country. And when we think about nationalism, and there's always been these perks and when I say perks, I mean it percolates up of nationalistic spirit, where there are those in positions of control or want to be who believe that they're endangered as a white supremacist mindset of this country should only be controlled by white men. And in that sense, we're going through that again. And those in positions of power who want to be in positions of power and cultivate this sense that white men should make all decisions and that's the best and that's what God wants and that's what the best thing is for this country. But then that says to the rest of us who are also living under this Constitution that your rights are secondary to this sense of one group has the insights, the mind, the ability to lead this country. And we know that that's not true. However, because of the U.S. Supreme Court, because of our Constitution, we have this debate of constantly, what does the U.S. Constitution say? What does it mean? And even when we say the framers, we make the framers out to be these very conservative people, the framers were made up of people with a lot of different mindsets. There were anti-slavery men in that room in 1787 who helped frame the Constitution. And so we have to realize that the framers were not just conservatives. And so when the originalists talk about the framers as though they wanted to continue slavery, they wanted to maintain this conservative ability of the country that only be controlled by certain people, this is actually not true. Mm-hmm. Because the Constitution is a compromise document, meaning that the men in that room compromised to create the foundation for the structure of a country. That's what the original Constitution is. There is nothing about individual rights within the Constitution itself. Those individual rights came through the Bill of Rights, and they were promised by James Madison and provided for in 1791. And that's when we start to get our individual rights. So the sense that it was meant to be a country only controlled by white men forever is really not the case. It was meant to be a document that would find the country in a sense where it would be grounded in a way that would be perpetuated over time. There then becomes individual rights, and the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment that came out of post-Civil War are the amendments that then, as I say, African Americans and other people of color put the conscience in the Constitution by litigating under the 14th and 13th Amendment and the 15th Amendment to give us the freedoms for all of us that we have today. So this evolution of our interpretation of the Constitution is an ongoing process. It doesn't start and stop only at a certain place where people want to freeze it in time. So we're seeing this time period of conservatism of the Supreme Court, but as Justice Ginsburg used to say, her dissenting opinions will one day be the majority opinions. And we have to have faith that we have to keep the struggle up, keep the pressure up, and maintain an ongoing vigilance when it comes to our constitutional rights.
Talk to me a little bit about the Supreme Court for a moment. Obviously, we know that the latest was that of Roe v. Wade, the overturning of Roe v. Wade. But we saw something happen that we never saw happen in all of Supreme Court history that we can date back to. That is, information is actually leaked from the Supreme Court. We've never seen anything like that, never heard anything like that. You hear that at the highest levels of government, but never the Supreme Court. It begs to ask the question about the Supreme Court and where we are today. Too political, or where are we?
Well, the Supreme Court has always been partially political because people on the Supreme Court are nominated by the president, and the president is indeed a politician. And so the presidents have continued to want to have their ideology followed on the court in some respect. Nowadays, it's followed whole cloth by those who were nominated by Donald Trump. They were vetted by outside entities with promises that they would then, undermine Roe versus Wade, give individual rights to certain individuals, take them away from other individuals, expand gun rights. There are a number of things. And of course, the religious doctrines that have been expanded as well under this court. So the public faith in the Constitution and in the Supreme Court is very low for a reason. Because in a court that has members who sit for life in order to protect them from political juggling has now, in the full face of America, put itself in the middle of it. One thing that Justice Coney Barrett said, we're not political hacks. She is indeed a political hack because she's allowed herself to be used by political hacks. And now she and others want to turn around and say, no, we're doing the will of our jobs and what we're supposed to do under the Constitution. It's like it's not true. Once they got used in this way, and used by politicians to carry out a political agenda, they become a part of the political hack system that they feel is embarrassing and insulting today. So yes, they could be intellectuals, but intellectuals can be used as political hacks as well. So where our court is at a very low place in the mindset of America, because they're politicians, they're thought of that many people believe they're politicians who were never elected by the people who now have a job for life.
Yeah. Let me take a quick break and continue our conversation with Professor Gloria Browne-Marshall. We'll continue our conversation in just a moment right here on Perspectives. And we are back here continuing our conversation with Professor Gloria Brown-Marshall. She is the author of the book, She Took Justice, the Black woman, law, and power. We were talking right before the break about the Supreme Court. And Dr. Marshall, tell me a little bit about this. When we talk about the Supreme Court, one of the things that really took hold for me was the fact that when we talk about Roe versus Wade, this wasn't something that pretty much was, this was a local that was brought to the Supreme Court level. This was something that happened locally in Mississippi, but it found its way to the Supreme Court. And here we are overturning Roe v. Wade. When does the Supreme Court have the power and the ability to make these legal decisions? Because, how do they determine what's legal?
Well, let's put it this way. The Supreme Court rules on a case that could be very local. It could involve very few parties, but the Supreme Court creates the law of the land. It's the court of last resort. And so although this is a case, Dobbs, from Mississippi, it is a case because it is decided by the Supreme Court that now is the law of the land for the entire country. And so many people have asked, was this a political decision? I believe it was a political decision. It was a decision that was in the making for many, many years. There are certain people who wanted to see the world, this country, from a very conservative viewpoint in which the access to this level of reproductive choice was seen as one that should not have been able to go forward for women. And so I think that, it had political ramifications, and then it began in a very political place and then ends up being a legal decision that we all have to bear up under until it is overturned.
So where do we go from here? I mean, when we talk about looking at being advocates and watching out and raising our voice, I guess the operative question is, somebody says, what do we do? How can we do this? And I know that you've been boots on the ground, raising your voice, bringing people in on this assignment, but what can we do?
Well, I think it is boots on the ground because now it's become a very political issue. And as it was written in the Supreme Court decision itself, Justice Alito is telling the country, and in particular women, he states in the opinion, then women should go to their state legislatures and have the states then pass legislation that allows for abortions or termination of pregnancies. But he doesn't say go to your Congress to get Congress to pass legislation, because if Congress passes legislation, then it's going to be like the Supreme Court case for the entire country. And it's also known that most of the states are controlled by very conservative governors. And most of the state legislatures are also controlled by the conservatives of their state. So it's nearly impossible in most places for these states all across the country to enact legislation that would allow reproductive rights that to the level they were before the decision in Dobbs. I would also just add this one point. What people have always done, and this goes back to, for example, Brown versus Board of Education. It's always been said that the Supreme Court many times lags behind where the country actually is, or is more conservative than most of the country. In this case, we have Supreme Court justices who said during their confirmation hearings that they believed that the precedent of Roe versus Wade was not one that they were intent on overturning. And basically, they were disingenuous in their answers when they gave answers at all. And so this was a 30-year plus plan to overturn Roe versus Wade. And so the country remains split in many ways. However, because this is a political split on the viewpoint, it could be religious, it could be political, it could be a nationalist split, and whereby people want more white babies and they believe that abortions are taking away white babies, and the prison system, if women of color are allowed to continue to have babies, will take care of the brown babies, but we need to have more white babies. And so in order to have those white babies, we need to make sure that there is no termination of pregnancies that will include white women. And it could be a mixture of all of these things. The point is, the country in many ways is looking now with a side eye to the Supreme Court as people who are politicians who have a nationalistic political agenda. And therefore, even when there are decisions made by the U.S. Supreme Court that go counter to our thought, our belief, and what we want, we've allowed them, because of this legal thinking, that, okay, this might not be what I agree with, but they use the law, and this is how the law resulted in this decision. This decision and some other decisions as well have made people believe this is not about legal reasoning. This is about a political motivation, and therefore it's undermined the credibility of the court and the credibility of the justices to be fair to people, but they're also not being fair to all people. They're going to continue to support a political agenda. And that's what many people believe in the thought process unfairly then will taint the court for some time.
Yeah. Well, I want to get an opportunity to share with you about this because you've got some great expertise and, the consummate professional. You're taking some of your talents and gifts and talents and you'll be nationwide. So talk to us a little bit about what you got coming up and where people can catch you because your voice definitely needs to be heard.
Well, I thank you. At this point, I want to make sure that people understand what their basic rights are. And this is something I've been working on for decades as part of my personal and professional mission, is to help people feel empowered regarding their rights. So I have a radio show, Law of the Land, on WBAI on Tuesdays at 9 a.m. And that's one aspect of what I do. The other, of course, is teaching at John Jay College. Right now, I'm a visiting professor and a fellow at Harvard Kennedy School. And I'm teaching there in the core curriculum in graduate school, but I'm also a fellow looking at arts and activism. So yes, I actually get to talk to people about that nexus between art and activism, because in order for us to come up with ways to make this world a better place, we have to be more creative. And that means tapping into our creative sides in whatever form that might take. The other thing that I've done to make sure that, civics, which is something that's not in a lot of schools anymore, is something that's there for those people who are learning civics for the first time and those who want a refresher course. Your Democracy. Your Democracy is my animated series. Yes, so you'll see a little animated cartoon me in 5-minute segments available for free. And this is produced by WHYY. It's an NPR PBS affiliate. And they are producing this, and we're launching this on September 13th. I'm going to be at the National Press Club with this, as well as my little Constitution book. Many people know my Constitution book, the U.S. Constitution in African-American Context. That's going to be launched out of National Press Club. And these things are all free. And so some people say if it's free, they aren't valued. But I know that people out there do value them. And so if they go to whyy.org, they can find the animated series for free. Teachers can use this in their classrooms for free. whyy.org is where they can get the animated series. And hopefully you'll have it on a link here if you can.
Yes, that's automatic. That's automatic for us. So we got you. No, we got you hooked up. We want to make sure that people are connected because I think in this day and time with so much is going on and there's so much political pandering going on, we need to know what the foundation is and where to launch from, right? And so this is really giving us a good opportunity to see some of the things that we really need to be paying attention to because we can literally be brainwashed to be watching a lot of other things and paying attention to a lot of other things when the truth of the matter is we miss the real issue that's at hand. So I want to thank you for how you continue to bring up the real issues that matter the most. Before we go, I want to get your perspective on what do you think we should really be paying attention to as we're getting to the end of 2022?
I think we should be paying attention to our loved ones, our families, our communities. We need to look around and see what do our families need, what is needed in our communities, and have the courage to actually ask for these things. And if we don't see them coming through our elected officials, as we come up to these elections, we need to not have elected officials who aren't listening to us because their paycheck, they pay their light bill with our money. our tax dollars. And so we need to make sure that we're politically astute, that we know what our rights are. And I always want to empower people to know their rights so that they can think critically, they can think independently. We may not agree, but you've thought it through and used good judgment in protecting yourselves, protecting your families and your communities, and making sure that we are living the best lives that we can live. And so all of that is part of, I believe, why we're here in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And in order for us to go forward and our progeny to go forward strong, healthy body, mind, and spirit, then we need to know the Constitution is what binds us all, not our religions, not our thought processes, not our education. The Constitution is the only thing, only document that binds us all. And so we need to know more about our constitutional rights. And I hope I can help continue to do that.
Dr. Gloria Browne-Marshall, it's been a while, but certainly we've made up for lost time today. I want to let you know I thank you so much for being with us, and got to have you back. Best wishes. Wish I could be with you at the National Press Club, but we're going to connect sometime.
It's online.
Huh?
The National Press Club is online. So it'll be, yes, the National Press Club is located in Washington, D.C., and there will be links for people who want to this. And I'll make sure that I give you the link to share with your viewers so that they can come online and see me at the National Press Club. All
right, we will do. Dr. Gloria Brown-Marshall, always an honor and a privilege to have you. Thanks for being with us. All righty, well, that about wraps it up for this edition of Perspectives. As you know, you can watch Perspectives every week here on Bronx's Channel 67. And if you want a brand new episode, come back next week. We'll continue to elevate the conversation, the discussion, and talk about the things that matter the most. For all of us here, I'm Daren Jaime saying thank you for watching Perspectives. Stay safe and be sure to share your perspective with somebody else. It just might make a difference in someone else's life.